Hey guys, welcome back to Franchise Tagged. It is the final mock draft time. This is it. The day before the draft. It's happening tomorrow. We all know it. We're all terrified. But let's kick things off. Here at pick one, we've got the Bears as we have for the past, I don't know, 3 or 4 mock drafts taking Caleb Williams. It's not really a surprise at this point who they're going to take. He's the only, or they are the only team that he's visited with, and it's a pretty obvious pick for them at this point.
Yep. Moving off of that, we have the Commanders, and we have the Commanders selecting Drake May. We don't know why they've been so odd with their smoke screens at pick 2, with pick 1 being so obvious. And there's, consistent talk of like, oh, we're still willing to trade. But it's all just baloney, and they're going to be taking Drake May here. He has the higher upside. He's been considered like a 1A, 1B with Caleb Williams. So you take him over Jaden Daniels, despite with all of their moves in the offseason may have implied.
And then at 3, we've got the Patriots who are left with Jaden Daniels. Their doors are apparently open for business with pick 3. If they get the right offer from the Vikings, I would assume they'd move down. And I've seen some stuff around them moving back and taking Michael Penix, but for the time being, I don't think they'll move out of the top 3 if they're looking at quarterback, because there are 3 polarizing quarterback prospects in this class. And whether or not he pans out as much as I would like him to as a Patriots fan, I think that they would have to take him if he's on the board.
Yeah, you said it. You said they're left with, and I feel like that's a little rude to. It's a little consolation prize. You get Jaden Daniels. Oh no.
Well, yeah, but I would have also said that if Drake May had been there. They're left with Drake May. It's not like they get to choose. It's because they don't get to choose. It's who do they get? And
Gotcha.
none of it. Oh my god, none of them are bad options. It's just that it's the third option. And then moving on to 4, we've got the Cardinals. They could trade out. They could give the pick to the Vikings, that we could have 4 quarterbacks going in the top 4. But just like last year, how there kind of seemed to be some talk about Levis going top 5, and then that dissipated completely and he ended up falling out of the first round. I think that that's not to that extreme, but I think that's kind of what we're seeing with JJ McCarthy. I don't think he's going to be like a top 5 pick or anything. But for that reason, we've got the Cardinals taking Marvin Harrison Jr. out of Ohio State. They traded out of the top 5 last year as well, which is what led to us kind of agreeing that they would probably stick and pick the generational prospect this time, rather than giving up the opportunity for a second year in a row when you've got a more competing roster than you did last year.
Yep. At pick number 5, we have Malik Neighbors going to the Chargers. With the lack of talent around Quentin Johnston, they're looking to add someone who has that slot versatility, can also play on the outside, just to kind of help Quentin further develop on the outside. They need to have other options to throw to as well for anyone to get open. And you add that with what is likely to be a more run heavy play action offense and under Harbaugh, I think that Malik Neighbors is going to absolutely devour in the slot, and then Quentin Johnston is going to be able to make big moves on play actions. So I think that while they could add Joe Alt and really buy into the ground and pound, they open more things up with the passing game, with the run game, and you kind of need those to be synergetic. You can't just buy into only the run, especially in the NFL.
Yeah, it's a passing league, especially with a guy like Justin Herbert at the helm.
Yep.
And that leaves us at 6 with the Giants, where we're in kind of a weird spot where they don't really have a full team. I feel like they're the worst situation out of the top 10. And the Patriots are as well. Not a great situation, but at least they're a little higher in the draft, so they can get one of the top guys. But I do think they're going to take Rome Odunze. I think that, with what they've said about Danny Dimes, they are committed to him for at least this year. They expect him to be their starting quarterback, so I don't think they're going to reach on a guy like JJ McCarthy and just throw him to the Wolves right away and have him fail in the same way that Daniel Jones failed because of a lack of weapons. So whether it is a quarterback later down the board this year or whether it's a guy next year, I think they want the infrastructure to support a young quarterback, and taking Odunze helps them with that.
Yep. And, Odunze is the one wide receiver kind of in this top 5 that I didn't actually make a scouting report on, but he is definitely an outside wide receiver 1 level guy. So sending him to the Giants, who have no real threat outside, is a match made in heaven for them to end up with him. more so than I would say Malik Neighbors. And at pick 7, we have the Titans selecting Joe Alt, tackle out of Notre Dame. I kind of alluded to it. He's a generational prospect. You shore up an O-line, and the Titans are definitely in a position to do that more so than the Giants, who are a little more solid at tackle and, as we said, need the wide receivers a lot. There's no wide receivers here. The Titans have 2 good veterans. They're going to go ahead and add to the O-line.
Yeah, and I think that even if you don't think that the Giants are short up at tackle with Evan Neal, I think that you've invested too heavily into tackle in the top 10 in recent years that you just can't do it a third time. Or you can't do it again. I don't know when they took Andrew Thomas, but I'm pretty sure he was pretty high. Anywho, on to pick 8, we've got the Falcons, and they're going to take Dallas Turner, defensive or edge rusher out of Bama. It's the common pick. It's the consensus that they take the top edge rusher. And a lot of people may think that it's, Liatu Latu. A lot of people think it could be a DB that they're taking, but the consensus is that they're taking a defensive position. And with Latu, you've got his medical retirement. And so I don't think that they would risk a top 10 pick on a guy who had to leave the game for 2 years because of a neck issue. But the other wrinkle that is thrown into this is their tampering with Kirk Cousins in the free agent or before the free agent period that could lead to them losing draft picks and possibly, at the very worst, losing this draft pick. I don't know how accurate reports circulating that might happen would be, but just the fact that it's a possibility is scary because it means that this mock draft is thrown completely out the window if they lose this pick. And knowing our luck, it'll happen right after we click the stop recording button.
Yep, of course. Because why would anything go our way ever?
Can't.
At pick number 9, we have the Bears sitting here, and instead of sending in a pick for, what would kind of be a reach at wide receiver or taking a second defensive player off of the board here, they're going to end up trading this pick back in the division to the Vikings, and the Vikings will select J.J. McCarthy. The compensation for this is going to be pick 11 and pick 23 for this pick. You might think that's a little much, but it's also the Vikings trading within the division. They're going to make them pay a premium, especially because of quarterback. We are also considering the fact that, there might be a day 3 pick swap just to kind of even the odds a little bit in the Vikings' favor, sweeten the deal. But getting into the reasoning for the pick, the Vikings would have liked to trade up with the Falcons here, but the Falcons need a bona fide defensive piece, and they can't risk falling behind the Bears, who could take that defensive piece at 9 if Dallas Turner was available. So they go ahead with the next best option. They trade up for J.J. McCarthy to be their quarterback of the future, and they pay a premium to the Bears, but it's one that the Bears are very happy to take.
Absolutely.
And at pick number 10, we have the Jets selecting, who would have guessed, Talise Fuaga, offensive tackle out of Oregon State. Probably if you want to go through all the mock drafts, probably the most consistent pick we've made throughout all of them is Talise Fuaga to the Jets. They want to protect Aaron Rodgers so he can be healthy for a full season and make a deep run into the playoffs. This is their route they're going to go for this year when they're kind of in that all-in mode with Aaron Rodgers on his waning years of his career.
I think another aspect of Talise Fuaga is that he could play guard, and for his rookie season, he may with Tyron Smith and who they've got already at tackle. But I do think that protecting not just Aaron Rodgers now, but their next QB, because Aaron Rodgers isn't going to be the Jets QB for another 10 years, but Fuaga could very well be the Jets starting offensive tackle for the next 10 years. So it's definitely a future-proofing move for a team that is somewhat ready to compete if Rodgers can stay healthy.
Yeah, it's also a little bit of a injury-proofing with, as you said, Tyron Smith and these other tackles. Like, he can start at guard, but they can easily shift him out if the injuries require him to.
Yep. Then at 11, sitting after their trade down with the Vikings, we've got the Bears taking Byron Murphy II, defensive lineman out of Texas. This is a pick that I've seen more recently. It's some hype that I've seen that I didn't see before. Before like this week, I think the interior defensive line consensus was that they'd fall to around the mid to late teens, maybe getting into the 20s. And now I'm seeing more of the Bears actually maybe preferring Byron Murphy a little earlier, locking up an interior defensive lineman to shore up that defensive line, which I think is a very good option for them.
for sure. And then at pick 12, we have the Broncos selecting Jared Verse, kind of this other upper echelon of the D line here going. And I mean, they shocked us. We were about to have them take a quarterback in this mock draft, and then they went ahead and got Zach Wilson. So they're not so much committing to trying to win and make the playoffs in this season in our eyes, but we have them having the best player available as opposed to adding more draft comp because when you're going to be losing, you want to take at the top, and then next year you can take at the top again. You don't really need to trade back and add these more picks because, oh, we have such a void of the roster. We need to add as much as we can because we're trying to win this year. It's more so planning ahead. They're going to take the best player this year, and then they're going to take the best player next year.
Yeah, and I also don't think that Zach Wilson is an answer for them at quarterback, but I do think that it is them saying, no, we're not drafting a quarterback in the first round because now they've got 3 rostered. And whether or not they cut 2 of them, they very well may. But I just don't see them taking a quarterback at 12 after trading for Zach Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
At 13, we've got the Raiders taking the first DB off the board. We've got Quinyon Mitchell out of Toledo. They could, if they do target DB, they could take Terrion Arnold. They could honestly take Nate Wiggins or Kool-Aid McKinstry too. All 4 of them, I feel like, are in a pretty similar tier, pretty similar boat. But I think Quinyon is just going to be their pick. It's mostly a vibe thing at this point. And the fact that he's produced the most out of any corner entering this draft, I believe. Just take into account the Toledo aspect, but I still think he's a good player and he'll be a good DB for the Raiders, who need some defensive help, but shored up their defensive line with Christian Wilkins in free agency and could just use some better cornerback play specifically.
Yeah, and they kind of have a nickel piece figured out for the now, so that's what kind of leads us away from a Terrion Arnold or Cooper DeJean pick here at 13.
Yep. Then at 14, we've got the Saints taking Olu Fashanu, offensive tackle out of Penn State. And the Saints have a pretty big offensive tackle problem, and that's if Ryan Ramczyk doesn't have to medically retire, which he may have to with his knee issue. So if he does have to retire, which is becoming a more real possibility, they will really have an offensive tackle problem on their hands, and they'll have to just really pray that Trevor Penning pans out, even though he has not looked great so far. But Olu here is a step in the right direction for them.
For sure. And next up at pick 15, we have the Colts. And I'll go ahead and I'll put my stamp of approval on this one for Brock Bowers, tight end out of Georgia, going to the Colts. We're both very big fans of Anthony Richardson, and I think that Brock Bowers gives them another pass-catching threat while also opening up the run game more with Anthony Richardson having an extra guy out there who's good at the run block, especially with their tight ends of late not being super great or productive at either the pass catching nature or the run blocking nature. So we go ahead and we really improve one position of the team on that offense. In what's effectively a rookie year for Anthony Richardson, coming back from his injury, we're going to bulk up the offense around him more so than anything else here.
Yep.
And at pick 16, we have the Seahawks sitting here, and we've long had them target a position that isn't super high on positional value at pick 16. So instead, we have the Steelers trading up, wanting to get ahead of the curve. They see a player who they didn't expect to be available here, and he just kind of entered the range that's available to trade up. So they go ahead and they trade up to draft Terrion Arnold, DB out of Alabama. They need O-line, they need DB. We have them instead going the top of the line slot prospect here over what would be, the 4th tackle off the board. So we have them targeting, that best player available aspect. And he will really shore up, their secondary because he gets to play alongside Joey Porter Jr. and kind of establish a new regime of the defense there.
Yep.
And then at pick 17, the Jaguars, I have them selecting Brian Thomas Jr., wide receiver out of LSU. I long hold the belief that the Jaguars need to make a move to get a young, cheap, and talented wide receiver for Trevor Lawrence to build alongside with. And, they were great. They were number 1 seed halfway through the year last year, but it fell apart, and they can't keep paying these other players who are slightly more established, like Gabe Davis, to be their answers going forward. So I have them taking Brian Thomas Jr., And while they could target all line here, this is kind of like the Bengals situation a few years back with Penei Sewell and Jamar Chase. And the Bengals made it to a Super Bowl. I have the Jaguars following that make and model here.
Yeah, I do think that Brian Thomas is a bit similar to Gabe Davis, but he's also just the best receiver available, and taking that young talent is the best option. And he could definitely also develop into a better route runner, where Gabe Davis is a little bit more established in his just, I'm running down the field, you can throw it to me if you want kind of role.
Yeah.
But sitting here at 18, we've got the Bengals, and they would take J.C. Latham, the offensive tackle out of Alabama. The Bengals went out and they got Joe Burrow some offensive line help in free agency with the addition of Trent Brown after he left the Patriots. And with T. Higgins seeking a trade, it seems to be the perfect spot for them to take receiver. I've seen it a lot. But semi-recently, T. Higgins said he expects to be a Bengal to start the season, and I would assume that he would expect to be a Bengal to play the season. So I think that with Trent Brown and his injury history, combined with the fact that he's only on a 1-year deal, taking the one of the better right tackle prospects in the draft is a good move for the Bengals for the future.
Yeah.
And then on to 19, we've got the Rams taking Johnny Newton, the defensive lineman out of Illinois. It is impossible to replace Aaron Donald. You just can't do it. He may be the best defender of all time. You can't just expect to replace him 1 year after he retires. But it doesn't mean that they shouldn't try to replace him. And some people I have seen have Johnny Newton ranked as either the best or the second best defensive prospect in this class. And I see it. I understand. And I think that would be their move, is to just get one of the best defensive prospects in the draft here at pick 19 if he slips all the way down. And they would be thrilled to do that, to kind of try to fill the void that Aaron Donald has left.
Yeah, it's, as you said, it's impossible to fill those shoes, but also there's going to be a void on that D-line now. All of the other D-linemen got to produce last year because of Aaron Donald's presence. So you can't just be like, oh, they did good last year, we can't draft D-line, like, well, let's target something else. They should draft D-line because they're going to need the extra talent to make up for the loss of Aaron Donald. So that way they may not be as productive as a unit, but they can be closer to that than they would without.
And I also think that their addition of Trey White kind of points towards that, to where they don't have to target DB in this draft because they got that in free agency. Even if it is on a shorter deal and an injury-prone guy, they kind of got a guy there where they didn't on the D-line.
Yep. And then moving on to the next pick, at pick 20 is the Seahawks after their trade back with the Steelers. And we have the Seahawks selecting Troy Fautanu, O-line out of Washington, due to that versatility that he has to be the interior O-line that they need, or the tackle that they might need. It's just kind of a versatile O-line piece to plug and play wherever they need him. And they'll go ahead and turn this card in very quickly because they would have taken him at 16 and he's available at 20.
Yep.
At pick 21, we have the Dolphins selecting Liatu Latu, edge out of UCLA. He's going to add a young, cheap speed threat to a team that signed several edges just last season in the postseason to even have anyone to rush the passer. So, this solves that future chance of that happening. And while he was medically retired for 2 years, he's been medically healthy for 2 years. And he passed the combine's medical testing. And I feel like that's something that you can't undersell with the rigorousness that they put players through at the combine.
Yeah, I also think it's more realistic for teams to kind of not look into it as much when you're outside the top half of the first round. And especially getting into the 20s, it's something that you can kind of be like, well, we'll take the chance now because he could very well end up being the best defensive player in the class, like easily. Yeah. But here at 22, we've got the Eagles taking Cooper DeJean, the defensive back out of Iowa. They need DB help. They had a top 30 visit with Cooper DeJean. It just kind of fits. He's a good defensive back. He could play safety. He can play corner. I hope he plays corner. And the Eagles need corners. So it all just kind of fits in my mind to get him to a place where he would be allowed to play corner. And I hope that he can do it at a high level.
Yeah. And at pick 23, we have the Bears, who are here after their trade back with the Vikings. And the Vikings got this pick from the Texans. And the Texans got this pick from the Browns. So, with this pick, we have the Bears selecting Adonai Mitchell, wide receiver out of Texas. They're lucky to have Adonai Mitchell fall to them at 23, especially given the buzz around pick 9 and, the likelihood to add a weapon for Caleb. It kind of died down post Keenan trade, but Keenan's kind of a veteran player. You can't rely on him for years into the future, i.e., Caleb Williams' rookie contract. So, while schematically, I don't agree that, Adonai Mitchell's a perfect fit into the slot or the 3 spot for them, he's going to be learning behind Keenan Allen until Keenan Allen moves on with that veteran, with that injury proneness as well. So he can step into that role very well if anyone goes down with injury. And he also gets to develop in the slot and kind of improve that aspect of his game, which he's very good at manned up. So you put him manned up in the slot and he will produce.
I also think that Tyler Scott is a horrific third option for a team to have. So adding a really good, what would be third option guy who's got a bag to go into and that can learn more off of Keenan and DJ Moore, I think is great for the Bears.
Yep. And at pick 24, we have the Cowboys sitting here and the Lions being the ones to call up to trade with them. And the Lions are calling to trade up for Kool-Aid McKinstry, DB out of Alabama. The Lions have seen this DB specifically slip this far, and they're, just like the Steelers, comfortable in this range now to make the jump to move up. And Brad Holmes, with his love for the Alabama school, he goes ahead and he trades up and he gets another player out of Alabama, notably who played alongside Brian Branch. And they already have that established chemistry and communication. So you get two really good defensive players who know each other, who will be able to make that communication. It's going to be a huge improvement from the secondary from last year.
Yep. At 25, we've got the Packers here after the Lions have just taken a defensive back, and they'll take the last one with a first-round grade from at least me, and that would be Nate Wiggins out of Clemson. They may need some O-line help. We've seen that in a lot of mock drafts, but I say they need DB help a little bit more, particularly a top-end corner to play across from Jair, and with Wiggins falling this far, it only makes sense for them to take him. I do think that he would slip this far just because he's a little bit on the smaller side and has already gotten injured running when he ran his 40. So he's already shown that there is some risk to him, but not enough to outweigh the benefits for the Packers here at the end of the first round.
Yeah. And at pick 26, we have the Buccaneers selecting Chop Robinson, edge out of Penn State. The Bucs, we've been advocating for them to take and pass rusher through a lot of these mock drafts. And unfortunately for them, Latu, who we may have had fall to them a couple times, and Jared Verse are both off of the board at this point. So are they going to pass up on adding what is a very clear need for them? No, they're still going to add Chop Robinson because he also feels like just a vibe check that just matches.
His name is Chop.
Yeah, Chop on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It's just culture fit. He seems like Baker Mayfield's going to love him. And with that, you can go into the next pick.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure if you had more to add. Yeah, so Chop Robinson, great guy. Anywho, at 27, we've got the Cardinals taking Darius Robinson, no relation to Chop, the defensive end out of Mizzou. Darius Robinson, he's someone who we haven't really been talking about through this pre-draft process, through this draft cycle, but he's one of the first, I think it was 13 or 14 names that said, yeah, I'll go to the draft. So he's got to know something that we don't. Because if I'm a player entering the draft that's like a fringe first round guy, I don't know if I'd go unless I had a team say, if you're there, I'm taking you specifically. Not like, if you're there and this guy's there, I might pick between you. But the other thing that, maybe I'm crazy. Maybe he just wants to go for the vibes of the draft. But I think that he knows something that we don't. And we've been advocating for a while for Jonathan Gannon to get his defensive player being a defensive-minded head coach and not having that from the drafts in the first round for the past couple, or for last year. So we have him doing that here with Darius Robinson.
Yeah, unrelated to the whole nature of the mock draft, for a period of time when doing the scouting, I thought Darius Robinson was Chop Robinson's real legal name And I got a little confused more than a couple times while looking at their tape. I was like, that's a different uniform. Well, they were different players.
Nice. At 28, we've got the Bills taking Troy Franklin, wide receiver out of Oregon. They need help in a few spots, not just receiver. They need help at DB. They need help at D line. They need help really across the entire defense. The cap really hit them hard, and the moves that they had to make to kind of appease the cap were damaging to them. But the Stephon Diggs trade has really kind of pointed us to them taking receiver, just because they lost their top two options in this one free agency period. They lost Gabe Davis, obviously, to the Jaguars in free agency, and then Stephon Diggs they traded to the Texans. So I think that they have to take a receiver high up in this draft, and Troy Franklin making it to them. I am not a big Troy Franklin fan. I know you're not a big Troy Franklin fan, but I think that the league may be bigger Troy Franklin fans than we are, so it seems a little bit more reasonable.
Yeah, and another aspect of this is, as you said, they need that D line help, a lot of help, a lot of places. But we've got all the DBs really out of here. We've got even some non-first round graded edges out of here. So it's getting thin everywhere but wide receiver, which is a very deep part of this draft. So it's just natural for them to take the best player available at the positions they still need, and wide receiver fits that perfectly.
Yeah. Then here at 29, we've got the Cowboys after their trade back with the Lions, and Amarius Mims is still on the board. So they're going to go ahead and snag him, get some offensive line help. They have a weaker offensive line, specifically at tackles. And, with Mims, like I said, falling into their laps, it's a godsend for that unit that has been pretty bad, especially losing Tyron Smith. They'll need any help they can get there.
Yep, and keeping with the offensive line, we have the Ravens at pick 30 selecting Jackson Powers-Johnson, center for Oregon, but we're projecting him more as a all-over-the-O-line kind of guy. He's going to fill in the spots that they need. They lost a tackle. They lost a guard. They're going to be looking to add something else to that offensive line in this draft, and obviously priority is going to be that guard position just for Jackson Powers-Johnson, but as I said, he can fit wherever they need him to. They're just going to find that out through camp. So while they could add a wide receiver, we're kind of getting into the deeper part of that wide receiver class where there's more of these like day two names coming up. So they add to the O-line instead.
Yep.
And at pick 31, we have the 49ers here, but oh wait, no we don't. Trade has occurred, and the Raiders are moving up into the first round once again to select Michael Penix Jr., quarterback out of Washington. We really feel that the Raiders aren't in a position to not draft a quarterback, but with their pick coming in pick 44, they really need to make a move because Michael Penix, so many opportunities for other people to jump them in that span. They're going to get ahead of the curve, and they're going to make sure that they have a fifth-year option. They want to prepare for the best and not for the worst. So they trade up, they get a quarterback, and if he's great, they get a fifth-year option for him. And if not, then he's not going to last to that fifth year for it to really matter. So they plan for the upside there, and they go ahead and they trade up here to select their quarterback of the future.
Yeah, and I do want to say our projected trade for that is that second round pick at 44 and a third round pick swap with the 49ers. Yep. So it's not a huge gamble for them to get that fifth year option, and it's not a huge cost. So it really is a smart move if they can get that done. I think they would. And then here at 32, last pick of the first round, we've got the Chiefs taking Xavier Legette, the wide receiver out of South Carolina. They could go a lot of directions here. Offensive tackle is a place where they kind of need some help, but Legette is a hell of a player. He's going to make an impact on any offense that he's a part of. He is big. He is fast. He is good at the catch point. And even though it doesn't seem like Rashee Rice will face massive repercussions, maybe a short suspension for his vroom vroom incident, it's still, I think, in the Chiefs' best interest to keep building up that receiving core for Mahomes, especially in a draft where that class is loaded. And where I think, like you were saying with the Ravens, where it's starting to get into those second round guys, I think those second round guys would be first round guys in other drafts, but the Ravens receiving room may be a little bit more fleshed out than the Chiefs, even with the addition of Hollywood Brown.
Yeah, I think that with the Chiefs, we saw after their Super Bowl loss, they saw O line was a problem, and they went ahead and they revitalized it in an off season. And I see the Chiefs kind of double dipping and doing the same thing. They already added Hollywood Brown, and they're going to go ahead and they're going to add a wide receiver because that was easily the weakest part of the team all of last season, and they don't want to see that be a problem for Mahomes going forward.
Yeah. And that just about wraps up this final first round mock draft. Draft is tomorrow. I hope this is exactly how it goes. That'd be kind of crazy. I also hope, just for our sake, that the Falcons didn't just lose their first round pick. I'm going to check my
Yep.
phone immediately after we
Check
stop
right
recording,
at the end of recording. Yep.
and it's going to have happened, and I'm going to be very sad. I may cry, but y'all let us know if you, not necessarily if you agree with our picks. Obviously, do that as well. But if you would be happy for your team if this is how the draft turned out. Obviously, teams like the 49ers kind of got screwed because they didn't get a pick in this mock, but y'all just made the Super Bowl.
Yeah, neither than the Panthers, all right, but they
They're
have
in
no
a worse
fans.
position than you. That's true. Yeah, their game's empty. Um, yeah, y'all let us know some stuff down in the comments. Keep us up to date. Keep us in mind. And stick around after the draft. We'll have some reactions coming out on our TikTok and on our YouTube channel and YouTube Shorts, as well as some full like first round reaction type things coming out a little bit after the draft.
Yep, some deeper grading of the draft a couple days after it. But with that, I think it's ready. I think it's we're doing.
Deuces.
Go Lions.
Deuces.